It seems that people learned the wrong lesson from the Activision Blizzard hoopla, which I talk about in this video linked down below. It's the same lesson that we've learned on the Me Too hoopla. The most important lesson that should be learned here is that in big media corporations, executives are going to abuse their power towards their employees, and the employees can't do much about it. The executives have no accountability, and there should be a way for people to be held accountable and hold them accountable, because a lot of these actions are absolutely unacceptable. Ever since my previous video talking about this matter, there are more things that happen in the company. The Cosby suit is a real thing, though apparently at the time the people didn't know about what Cosby did and it was a dumb reference to his outfit or something. But even still, it doesn't really age well, and there are text messages from the executives talking about screwing women. An Activision IT worker pleaded guilty for secretly filming colleagues in office bathrooms. No, really? That happened? Jalen Brack, the Blizzard president, and many other prominent Blizzard employees left the company. Activision faces more and more lawsuits. Sponsors are pulling out of Overwatch esports. It's not a great look. And yet, despite all of that, people continuously focus on the wrong thing. The issue is executives abusing their power. The issue is employees who can't keep their libidos to themselves, and the executives who let these employees get away with it. It's not about how there are more men in the company and therefore all of those men are gonna harass all the women. It is certainly not about how the games that Blizzard makes have sexy women. Ubisoft doesn't have a lot of sexy women in any of their recent games, and they still got themselves into scandals. Out of curiosity, I went out to see if Japanese companies got themselves into these scandals as well. Koei Tecmo, the company behind Dead or Alive, one of the most sexualized series of games of all time, turns out even they got themselves into scandals, or at least Tecmo got themselves into scandal back when it's still just Tecmo, because this news was from 2006, and even then, the claims are sketchy and doesn't have as much hard evidence and victims as Activision Blizzard's case. Point is, it's totally possible for a company to claim to be pro-diversity and pro-women, but at the same time, the executives treat their women like absolute garbage. It's totally possible for a company to have their games to comply to all sorts of standards that the current year progressives and moral guardians make and still be filled with predators and harassers. It's almost as if the issue is the abuse of power and influence rather than the fictional women or how many men are in the company. So here comes Jason Schreier, a game journalist that is incredibly well known of blocking people left and right. Block, loads and loads of blocks, and he's not gonna stop blocking, especially if you disagree with him. This guy straight up admitted to everybody that he has heard several stories about all of the misconducts that happened at Blizzard and even other video game companies. I don't know why he doesn't report them, considering how he reports all sorts of misconducts from many other game companies, including BioWare, Ubisoft, and Naughty Dog, and a lot of them use anonymous sources. It's only until the lawsuits come in that he does the reporting. But then one game company shows that most of its developers are men, and Jason comes in and says, "It's pretty wild that in 2021, a new game studio still looks like this." I don't see what's wrong with the picture, but Jason does, and he suggests that the dev team is filled with men, and therefore it's bad. I need the clip from the actually good Jason.
I fail to recognize the correlation.
The implication here is that because it's filled with men, it's going to foster a culture of harassment and misconduct like Activision Blizzard, even though the issue isn't that it's filled with men and more on the abuse of power from the executives, which doesn't necessarily have to be men. But hey, continue focusing on the wrong issue. Jason continues by talking about a podcast that was just two dudes, but then he adds a woman, and it got exponentially better. Wow, Jason, way to reduce your fellow coworker to just a woman. He continues by saying that different perspectives improve your product, but he never specifies how it improves it, other than the fact that the different perspective comes from the coworker being a woman. I'm pretty sure there's a lot more to it than just that. And there is more to it than just that. He clarified it in his next tweet, but the fact that her being a woman is the first thing that he said about her says a lot about his priorities. He just reduced his coworker's achievements to the fact that she's a woman just to push his own agenda. And of course, he declares to everyone that anyone who responds with "all that matters is game quality" is getting blocked. Well, I already got blocked by you, Jason, but I can still see your dumb takes because people know a thing or two about how to screenshot and opening your tweet through a different account. And here's a funny thing. The team leader of the game developers that Jason showed, not not exactly a fan of his takes. Alex Hutchinson said some really dumb things, and I've actually covered one of them in my weekly streams. By the way, go subscribe to my new stream channel, link down below. Stream is Saturday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Anyway, back in October 2020, he made one really stupid take. If you're one of my stream regulars, you might remember that he said how game streamers should pay game developers from the revenue of their streams. He was also the creative director of Stadia, so it's a pretty biased take as far as I'm concerned. But that's not the spiciest of takes. Back in 2012, when he was the creative director of Assassin's Creed 3, he said that there is a subtle racism to the business where Japanese game developers are forgiven for doing what they do. I disagree. There are very explicit racism towards Japanese game developers for making the kind of games that they make, especially when those games involve scantily clad women. He then says that the reason why he said that is because the stories from Japanese games are pure gibberish, comparing Bayonetta's story to Gears of War. It's not exactly a fair comparison. Bayonetta's story is pure gibberish, but there are loads of other Japanese games with stories that actually make sense. But you know what? That's a take from 2012, so I'm not going to be too harsh on the guy. All I'm saying is, he doesn't exactly make the best of takes, and I don't agree with everything that he said. But still, to condemn him because he doesn't hire a lot of women in his game studio, it's just dumb. Adding more women doesn't necessarily make a game studio better. It depends on their personality, it depends on their skills, it depends on what kind of perspective that they can bring to the table. And it can't just be, oh, they're women and therefore they can bring more perspective just because they're women. No, it has to be much more than that. And even if the company is like 50% men and 50% women, even if the executives are 50% men and 50% women, it's still possible for them to abuse their power so that the employees suffer. Heck, we don't even have to look far enough. Activision Blizzard's own Fran Townsend, the vice president for corporate affairs, corporate secretary, and chief compliance officer, she at one point tweeted out an article talking about the problem of whistleblowing at the same time as her employees are whistleblowing the scandals in her own company. She herself has a really interesting history. She was once the assistant to the president for Homeland Security and Counterterrorism during the Bush administration, and she defended the administration's use of extreme interrogation and intimidation techniques. So again, it's not about the men, it's not about the women, it's about the abuse of power. But hey, I'm no game developer, I'm just a gamer. Who am I to say what's going on and how they can work? But speaking as a gamer, I can tell you that most gamers only care about the final product. The game addicts and the fanboys don't care about the scandals that are facing the game companies on their favorite games. They're gonna continue on playing their games and spending loads and loads of money to the companies. That explains why the player base, even before the scandal, dropped to around 50% from its peak, and not, say, 100%. And by the way, yes, I understand that there are game developers inside the company that deserves your support, but by purchasing the games from Activision Blizzard or Ubisoft or whatever companies that got themselves into any sorts of harassment or abuse scandal these days, you're not just supporting the developers, you're also supporting the same executives that caused this entire problem to begin with. In fact, you are most likely to support these executives even more. We've seen through Activision Blizzard alone that Bobby Kotick disproportionately got loads of money, and all of that happening at the same time as game developers being laid off of the company. This is a well-established fact at this point. So the money that you paid for the game, it most likely won't go to the developers. It will most likely go to the executives first, some of whom caused this entire thing to begin with. That's the key problem that should be addressed. Executives abusing their power. And yet for some reason, people are blaming it on the dumbest of factors. Take this article, for example. 5 essential reads about sexual harassment and discrimination in gaming and tech. A lot of the blame falls on the gamers because the harassment and discrimination starts there, I guess, but the internet landscape and the corporate landscape are two completely different environments. The internet allows anyone to be anonymous, and that leads them to do whatever they like to people and not receiving any forms of repercussions. The best part of the internet is that unlike your boss, you don't have to answer to anyone. You can just ignore them, block them, and just prevent them from having any access to your social media. While they can be a problem, at least they are manageable. Corporations, however, have their own rules and regulations. Their employees have their own positions, jobs, and verifiable information about their identities. So if they screw up, they're gonna get punished. Executives, however, tend to abuse their power so that they don't get punished. And these people are your boss. You have to answer to them. You have to comply to their rules. People can do whatever they want in these companies if the executives actually let them to do whatever they want and they abuse their power for their own benefits, which is what's happening to Activision Blizzard. Also, way to completely misrepresent your statistics article. The article says that the low rate of participation are not a reflection of interest because 57% of women ages 18 to 29 play video games that are on the esports category. I checked on the citation because I smell a load of BS, and that 57% figure actually refers to the amount of women between the ages of 18 and 29 that say that they have played video games, which is not the same as 57% of women ages 18 to 29 play video games that are on the esports category. In fact, this entire article that you cited is not quite sure in why there aren't a lot of women who are interested on esports or gaming in general. While there are lots of women who have played video games, only a small percentage of them identify as a gamer, and that's because it's a hobby that not a lot of women are interested in. It's not because it's a boys club. The internet has made this hobby a lot more inclusive to everyone at this point. It's just that they don't like to play video games. I, for example, don't like doing makeup. It's not because most makeups are done by women. The internet has shown that men can do makeups too. It's just not my thing. And that's fine. I just hate the fact that we have a really big video game scandal that loads and loads of people talk about, and yet none of the people who actually have power to change the industry can really pinpoint to the real issue at hand. Executives abusing their power is an issue that a lot of companies, especially big ones, will always face. We need to find a solution so that these people can be held accountable and everyone can follow the rules and face the repercussions when they did wrong. What we have instead are people blaming one another, blaming an entire group of people or demographic, and completely derailing the conversation from the real issues at hand. No, making your company to have the same amount of men and women will not fix the issue at hand. If these same men and women abuse their power and not receive any repercussions. No, anonymous gamers who say inappropriate things to the internet are not the issue here. They're an entirely separate issue that has no relation to the issues at hand, and they are totally avoidable, whereas your executives in your company that you're working for are not. That's all I have to say for this matter. Click the like button and subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and support me through the links down below. Also, check out my streaming channel and subscribe there in case you haven't. Stream at Saturday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time.